Hi everyone and welcome back to another video with me, Shruti. You're watching Living Our Ascension. This is basically going to be a series of videos that I do on astrology. And, because what happens is that, astrology is one of the tools that I used along my process of ascension and enlightenment, to really come into myself. And as you might know, one of the most important things about ascension is know thyself, is coming into a knowing of what you are at a soul level. And astrology was one of those things that really helped me. And certain aspects of astrology more than others, because you could really get into astrology into lots of details, but there's certain aspects of it that I wanted to speak about that are more important than others perhaps for the ascension path. And one of these things is the placement of the north node of the moon. And I really wanted to make this video especially for those of you who are perhaps haven't delved into astrology yet, or you don't know, you're beginners. And that's fine, because I'll be showing you how you can calculate it yourself. It's actually not like a calculation. You just have to see what sign it's in, what house it's in, and then you just need to listen to my explanation for it and see if it gives you some tips. Because I remember that, the position of the North Node, it shows us what our destiny is in this life, but it also shows us, those areas of our life where we fall the most, perhaps which are the most challenging for us, areas that are quite unknown. It can often show us where we have addictions, the challenges that we have, and those are actually the areas that we are really obsessed with. And that's why when we don't get it in the moment, we sort of cling to the lower aspect of that energy, and we that's where the addictions come in. And but once we know what the higher aspect of that same energy is, then we can use it in a more productive way, and that actually becomes our destiny. The North Node is the North Node, so basically, is not a planet, like you have the sun in a certain sign, you have the moon in a certain sign. These are all physical planets. But the North and South nodes, they represent these points. They're just points in the sky. And you can say that that's where a certain high level of energy comes in. So it's kind of like, the energy is higher than what the planets represent. So even though they're not physical, they actually represent the point of, if you look at a person's life and you see that they went through the process of enlightenment within themselves, and you see how they did that, like what events caused that more specifically, and what realizations then led them to do that, like what were the main themes. One way that you can see that is through astrology. And so the position of the North and South nodes can really show us that. So I hope that it is with that end that I'm making this, that I hope that this can help you. So if you're subscribed to this channel and you see 12 different videos, because there's 12 positions in astrology depending on what sign it's in, then that's the reason why that I'm putting out so many. And I don't plan to put out lots of different astrology videos, so don't worry about it. It's it's not going to be an every day or every week thing. If you see lots of videos uploaded at once, that's the reason why. Or there might be one after the other, I'm not sure yet. So if you're watching this and this is not your sign, just wait for your sign to come. And so what I'm going to do is, first I'm just going to give you a little bit more of the introduction, and especially you need to check which house and sign it's in, so that you can then find that video on my channel related to that house and sign and listen to those two videos. So what you need to do is, if you don't know, if you already follow astrology and you already know, you follow a certain house system, because in astrology there's different systems, house systems, which can, and depending on which system you use, the sign, not the sign, but the house position most likely of your South and North node can be different. So if you already use astrology, then you can use whatever house system you use. That's fine. You can listen to my interpretation for it. But if you don't, then I follow the whole house system, and I really like this system. And it's also the simplest to understand as well, so it's quite easy. I will explain it in just a second. It's not hard, so don't worry about it. So what you need to do is click the link below this video. When you check the description below this video, you'll see a link to a website where you can go and you can enter your birth information, and it'll generate your astrology chart. And on that astrology chart, then you can check your north node, where it is. And so the information that you need before you go to this website is your birth date, the place and the place of birth, as well as the exact time of birth. So if you don't know your time of birth within like 10-15 minutes, if it's not accurate, then only check the sign of your north node, because the sign should remain the same, no matter, as long as you have the day right, the birth day. But the time, changes the house that it's placed in, like where on the wheel it is. If you don't know your birth time, then just listen to the video for the sign. So for example, my north node is in the sign of Taurus, and it's in the 11th house. But if I don't know my time of birth, I will just look at north node or Rahu in Taurus, and I won't really check because I don't know which house it's in, because I don't know my time of birth. But if you know that your time of birth, which should be most of you, and this needs to be accurate, so check it from like a birth certificate or another kind of official document. If you know your birth time, then enter that information, and you'll know which house it's in as well. And then listen to 2 videos then. So first listen to the house video, and then listen to the sign video. And I've drawn a chart here that I can show you an example. When you go on that link and you enter the information, one of the charts on that page will be a circular one like this. So check the circular chart and look for this RA. This is Rahu, or it's also called the north node. In Vedic or Indian astrology, it's known as Rahu. The north node is known as Rahu. And the opposite is Ketu. Ketu is the south node. And south node shows what our past has been like, what our default patterns are. And Rahu shows what we are coming into, what our destiny in this life is, what purpose we are here to fulfill. So now, as you can see, we're going to focus a little bit more on the north node, because that is what we need to fulfill, and the south node is basically what we're leaving behind. So you'll see me mention this more, much more, but this whole axis is important. So the Rahu or the north node, for my chart, is in the sign of Taurus and is in the 11th house. And how do you know this is the 11th house? Is because the first house is always this one. If you look on the chart, on the western side, it'll be over here on the western side. This is the first house always on a circular chart. So mine is Cancer. So this is 1. You always count the first house first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you get to 11. So this is the 11th house. So my north node is in the 11th house. And like I said, it's in the sign of Taurus. So here I've written down, so write down these 2 things, that north node or Rahu is in the 11th house. So this is the video I'll see first, north node or Rahu in 11th house. The video I'll watch second is north node or Rahu in the sign of Taurus. So these are the 2 videos now that I need to watch. So once you go on this website and you have this figured out, you write these 2 things so that you don't get confused, then you can watch these 2 videos. And if you have any questions, if you're watching this video, you have any questions, you're confused, let me know in the comments below, and I'll try and help you out if I can. And now let's begin, with a little bit of explanation of what the north and south nodes are, and then I will, proceed to the position. So the south node in astrology is known as, our past. If you believe in past lives, it shows us what kind of a past life we had, what we were in our past life. If you don't believe in past lives, then it's something that the past that we have had in this life, our childhood, when we were growing up, let's say like the first 20-30 years of our life. And the north node then shows us what is our actual destiny in this life. And the south node, representing our past, shows us what we're good at. It's something that we are quite good at already, that we have established ourselves in. Imagine like if it's like a past life, we've actually done that already. It's something that we have are quite mature in, but that doesn't mean that we have fully mastered it. And then how do we master it though? It can be an area in life, the South Node, where we are a little bit dissatisfied. And how do we make that complete? How do we become satisfied in it and become fully complete in that life, in that area of life, is if we develop where our North Node is placed. So we are, lots of astrologers say that you need to let go of the position of where the South Node is, like whatever the South Node represents in your life, let go of that area and only focus on the North. It's not really exactly like that, but the thing is that wherever your South Node is sitting, you just need to it's something that comes easily to you, that you can fall back upon, but there isn't as much of an dedicated effort needed in that area of life, because if you overdo that, then it becomes stagnant. So how it will expand is when you go towards what the North Node represents, and then not only will that area, unknown area of the North Node of your destiny flourish, but also this area that you are good at but have not fully mastered, this also becomes mastered. So the two opposite ends come together, and that's when transcendence happens, because that is how we transcend duality. So all of us in our heads, in the beginning, we have why we haven't become enlightened yet is because there is some part of us that considers something as good or bad, weighs this one as better than the other, and the other is not something we have fully gone into, we haven't fully embraced. So when we actually go in this direction of the North Node, we fully embrace it in a grounded way, in a way that's not ungrounded, or trying to do it in a quick way, in a superficial way, but we actually delve into it there. And this is something that, where the South Node is, we're quite developed in it. When the two of them come together, then both of them grow. It becomes that yin yang, that balance, and that means that through that area of life and the struggles that we've had within it, and then the realizations, we transcend. So when we truly do that, that's when the enlightenment process happens. And if you check the charts of people who perhaps have reached a certain level in their enlightenment, you can see that, the events that happened in their life that caused that, both the problems and the transcendence, a big part of it is related to this axis. So this is the axis, according to me. I've never read this, but according to me, this is how we transcend duality. So that's our life purpose in this life. You might have a certain job, like let's say you're a teacher, or let's say you're a doctor, because the sign of Virgo is a doctor. Let's say your sun is in Virgo, or you are a doctor, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you came into this life to become a doctor. It's just your job, it's what you do. Let's say your North Node is in another sign that represents being a pioneer or something, then your main purpose was to become a pioneer, to do something in a new way, to really develop that, to forge new paths. And because your sun is in Virgo, you do that as a doctor. You could have easily done that. If your sun was somewhere else, you could have easily done that being a pioneer, being a teacher, being, a homemaker, whatever it might be. But the main purpose for which you incarnated in this life was not to be a doctor, it's to be a pioneer, to do things in a different way. It's just an example. So it shows us, the position of our North Node shows us what is our destiny in this life. It's always an area that is the most darkest in our horoscope, that we don't know. That's the unknown region. It represents our unknown. The South Node, our past, represents the comfort zone, the default patterns that we keep going back to. And then what happens, like when we keep doing something that we have done, it becomes boring, it becomes redundant, there's some stagnation there. And the only way that it can expand is if we open up new areas of life, and then we bring those skills, then they merge with something we already know. So that's what the North Node represents. And where we have the North Node, it's actually this really high vibrational energy, and we will be doing things in a very different way, in a more eccentric way. And we can be quite eccentric with it, which I'll explain through every sign that when we do that. But what the North Node represents, is also something that when we first go into the unknown, like when we go into the darkness, the dark forest, we're going to fall down a few times. We can't see anything. We're not familiar with that space. But it's something that, really draws us in. It's the mystery. It's the most mysterious thing, and it's like we can be obsessed with it, with that area of life, and we really want it. We desire it, But when we go into it, we can first latch on to the more superficial things that it represents, and those become the main obsessions in our life, the main personality, defects, quote unquote, even though there's no as such defects. But those become the most problematic areas in our life often. But when we learn to see what the higher aspect of that same energy is, and we put our efforts there and we keep going it, because in the beginning, when we try and do it the right way, something, instead of grabbing onto this more superficial aspect of it, when we go deeper into the unknown, into the darkness, we will fall quite a few times. So it's really important for us to be on that path, to keep at that path. And the North Node is said to mature around the age of 42 or 45, and that's when we truly learn, after falling down quite a few times, the lessons of what it represents. But if you are on the path of enlightenment, of ascension, this can happen much before. You don't have to wait for that default time of 42 and 45. Perhaps things will become more grounded at that time, but you can really accelerate your journey as well. So I don't want to keep speaking about this and make this too long, but that is what the North Node represents. And when you combine this North and South Node axis, this becomes transcendence. And I'll be speaking about, depending on your placement, what that axis is for you and what you need to unify, and the negative experiences that can happen, as well as how you can transcend them, and what the positive side of that is. And in the comments below, please let me know if you resonate with this, what particular challenges you've gone through. Let us all know. And finally, I also want to say that I have astrology readings on my website as well, so please check them out. They are relationship readings, because relationships are another aspect of life through which we find out what we are as a soul, because all the relationships that we meet in our life, they reflect our own soul. So it's the beloved path, and there's lots of people out there who are looking for their soulmate, their twin flame, and that's what this reading is all about. It shows you what kind of partners come into your life, at a physical level as well, what their qualities are, but also at a higher level, what that union, that marriage looks like, and it shows you what that union with yourself looks like, so it brings insights into that. They're very interesting codes. So that's one of the readings I have. It's called Soulmate Astrology Codes reading. And then the other reading I have compares two charts. So for example, your own chart, and if you have a partner. So if you're single, you can go for the first one. It'll bring you insights into your default patterns as well. What holds you back from fulfilling relationships, what your default patterns might be, anything in the way. Because when we come into that conscious awareness of it, then things start to change, and then we draw partners that represent that higher energy instead, for more fulfilling relationships. And the other reading that I have compares two different charts. So for example, you and your partner, you give me their birth information as well as yours, and I compare them and speak about the dynamic of this relationship, when the two energies come together, what the clashes are, what the problems can be, and how you can transcend them, as well as what the higher union looks like because the highest union that we can have on this planet is of service. You are here to serve at the end of the day. You are a creator being, so you are here to create something. You are here to serve yourself and all of creation. And when two people come together, they can build something that is even greater than what they can do individually to create, to serve. And there's charts that are not just the main astrology chart. There's these divisional charts in astrology as well, and all of them can things like that can show what that purpose is, what our higher purpose is. So when we know that, we come into it it ourselves first, and then we draw partners that represent it, and so it becomes that actual soulmate union, and not just, you know, any random physical partners that we might have that only fulfill us at a socio-economic level, but also at the higher level. Anyway, so those are the readings I have on my website. Please check them out in the astrology services section of www.LivingOurAscension.com. You can find the link below this video. And now let's move on to the sign position. So Rahu, or the north node of the moon, in the 8th house or in the sign of Scorpio. If you have this position, then this video is for you. And basically, if you have this position, that means that the opposite node, which is Ketu, or the south node, that's in the sign of Taurus, or in the 2nd house. And this shows what your past has been like, what your comfort zone is. And what that means is that inherently you're a person who is very attuned to the stability of life. Like, you are somebody who is very stable, you know, very good with material resources and handling like the material side of life, which doesn't only mean money, but, you know, everything, like all the objects that we possess, and even family, because that's also kind of something we possess, you know. So you really value that, and you're very good with handling this as well, which makes you a very stable person, and somebody who's very dependable, somebody who can be quite a good resource for yourself and for others. You can be very financially independent as well, or at least, you know, you're somebody who's able to, you have this confidence, like you're able to rely on yourself when it comes to material sustenance and just, you know, being resourceful, having these resources. You know, even if you don't have like a lot of money yourself, you know how to, you know that if you're put in a situation, you know, you'll be able to generate it somehow. Like, there's this confidence that's there with like the material side of life, and you know, you have come to know life as something that is very stable. But what happens is that in this life, then you are developing the other side, you know, you're asked to develop the other side, which is the unstable, you know, side of life, which is the house of death and transformation, you know. It's not related to the material realms as much, and more related to the energetic realms, the spiritual realms, the hidden side of life. So it rules things like psychology, like the occult, you know, things that are hidden and buried underground, for example, if you have this position, you can, you know, find yourself in careers like dealing with coal, iron ore, you know, like things that are again hidden under the ground, gemstones even. Also, this house rules with emergencies and, you know, life and death situations. So it can be people who work in, you know, for example, like ambulance workers, and surgeons as well, you know, because again, like, that's a life and death situation and you're helping them out. Healers of all kinds, you know, tantrics, and working with like kundalini energy and stuff like that. But in this life, you know, you will find yourself obsessed with that side of life, which is all about this death and transformation, about emotional empowerment, about, you know, sexuality as well, because again, that's the hidden and has to do with this death and vulnerable process, you know, when you look at it at a deeper level. And what happens is that you however, like, even though you're obsessed with that side of life, it's not something that you're very mature in. So often, you know, when we begin, like, when we begin to take steps in an unknown zone, which is what this is for you, you know, then we can grab onto the first thing that we see that looks all flashy and glamorous, you know, and we may not have the recognition of what the grounded form of that energy looks like. What is the actual mature form of that energy is often not as glamorous on the surface, but it's actually the real thing. So that is you are developing the real side of that in this life. You're learning to recognize that and come into it yourself. What happens is that you can have this comfort zone of you know, really relying on like I said before, you're somebody who relies on themselves, and even can be somebody who's a good resource for yourself, and financially as well. But what you even though you might be obsessed with you know, intimacy, sexuality, and you know, being vulnerable, and psychology, spirituality, and all of these hidden things of life that require us to go deep below the surface and not just what's on the material level and the physical level. But even though you have this obsession, there can be a part of you that never allows yourself to fully penetrate. So for example, it can lead to somebody, for example, who loves psychology or who loves the occult and spirituality and is like delving into 10 forms of that and is just devouring all of this knowledge because they're obsessed with it, but they don't realize that they haven't fully gone deep enough with any one of those. So it's about taking that one and going deep within fully. There can be this fear that you're not aware of, which has to do with actual intimacy, which involves the death process, intimacy with ourselves, which means people with this position, can often say things like, oh, I'm fine, even when they're not, for example, because they have this idea that, I can handle anything that's happening in life at a physical level. I know how to work things out in a way where I can balance it out or I can handle it. But the thing is that you only know that at a physical material level, and all aspects of life cannot be handled that way. So when we only focus on one side of life, we tend to overcompensate and then something gets imbalanced. So what you need to develop in this life is emotional stability. Even though you have material stability, you know how to be that person. So emotional stability means and emotional empowerment only comes when we are fully willing to go vulnerable with ourselves, which means not being afraid of the negative side of the so-called negative or dark side of life and all of those emotions that we have. So like I said before, you can have this obsession with it. Like people with this position can have an obsession with reading all about death and transformation and sexuality and all of these subjects that have to do with the hidden taboo things, conspiracy theories as well. But again, often this obsession plays out, but they're not fully going deep within themselves to see it as well. And they can deny things. For example, this position in an extreme sense can also lead to jealousies and possessiveness, and sometimes they just won't even admit it to themselves that they might feel these emotions. But we're all human, and intimacy and emotional empowerment is about not judging anything. So it's about embracing what is there and without any judgment. So any kind of fear that you have, even if it's something like possessiveness and jealousy, it all just comes down to a fear that we have. And when we see it for what it is, without any like a child, like a child makes a mistake of some kind, so-called mistake, but we don't judge that child and we don't tell them, oh my god, you did this, and scream at them. Like we accept them and embrace them as they are, because they're just a child. And when you can look at all aspects of yourself that way, that is when the actual penetration happens. That is when we actually accept our dark side and become one with it. That's when we become fully emotionally empowered and intimate with ourselves. And it only once you become intimate with yourself can you become fully intimate with another person as well. Whether that's emotionally and sexually too. So that can be delayed for these people until they become grounded in that, as well, when they learn to be fully intimate with themselves and just go deep. So I wanted to give you one, physical example. So for example, I learned this course from an astrologer called Ernst Wilhelm, and he gives an example of how this played out in someone's life, and I wanted to share that example with you. So for example, he mentioned that there was a man, like a client, who came to him, and I think he was very stable, like in his he was a very responsible person, which is what, if you have this position, you would be a very responsible, stable person that people can rely on. And he had this very studious and good with his grades and stuff like that, in a very good college as well, with a good course and people expected like a good future out of it, because he'd been so stable and he was enrolled in like the course of his choice and stuff like that. But so that's showing again material security, being able to handle that well. But when the emotional side is not as mature, so for example, he fell in love with this woman, and what happened was that I think they went to an astrologer or something happened, and the astrologer said that she, if you don't marry her, she'll die, or something will happen, or you'll break up, or I don't know what exactly it was, I can't remember. But this was a superstition, you know, because somebody who's emotionally balanced within themselves will have the discernment to know that, you know, that something like this is not going to happen. However, like, because this person hasn't developed that emotional empowerment, and again, you know, this north node in the sign of Scorpio can lead to superstitions as well. So it can, on the positive note, it can lead to this really high level of intuition, you know, these sudden breakthroughs in intuition and seeing into the other realms in one way or another. But the lower form of that can be, you know, just believing things that are not there, like it gets exaggerated. Your fears and paranoias, whatever you have at an emotional level, they get exaggerated and become larger than normal. So that can be something that happens with this position, and these people can be, you know, emotionally vulnerable at that level because they haven't developed it, and then they can't kind of distinguish what's grounded and what's not because they haven't worked with it enough. So anyway, with this boy then, you know, then I think he just, like, because he thought that his girlfriend's gonna die or something, he just, like, he left everything, went against, like, the wishes of his family, so kind of left his family and married this woman and left his university career. Like, I mean, his he only had like a while left to complete like the course, and he just quit it. Everything that he had worked for, you know, that material stability, that responsibility that he was known for, you know, quickly gone in one go, because this other side of life is not equally balanced of emotional maturity. So with this access, you are learning to balance the two. You know, you are learning that you are only as materially secure as you are emotionally secure. So only when you start developing a little bit more of emotional security and relying on that, you know, on yourself as an emotional stable person, somebody who can come to themselves and not be judged, for example, you know, and who can see them intimately. When you can see yourself intimately as you are without judgment, and really become empowered that way. Only then can you really trust yourself to not mess up, you know, the material side of life that you have worked so hard for, that you are actually quite good at. So in this life, when both are balanced is when both sides prosper, you know. In this life, you might be thrown into circumstances where you need to be open to the resources of other people and become comfortable with that, because, you know, oftentimes it's easier actually to just rely on ourselves and to be the one who provides to others, but it can be more vulnerable to accept from others. But this is what actually opens us up to you know, vulnerability and to intimacy with others, because intimacy is also important. So and it's the same with like with our finances and emotional, you know, we have to be vulnerable to open that up, to open ourselves up to those things with others. So that's something also, you know, every time that you do, it might help you to balance this axis. And with this position, you are asked to know that, you know, that which is not solid, that which is not material, also has a lot of value. And to remember, you know, that the only constant in the universe is change. So that's a very important line, that there's nothing that, you know, stays forever. So if you just spend all of your time and energy on making things stable, you know, that will fail you at some point, because everything dies in the end. So we have to become comfortable with the idea of death and rebirth, with the fact that things leave and come. You know, this is also part of life, and it's also an equally beautiful part of life as having physical things and enjoying them and in being sensual with them and valuing them. We also have to value change and transformation. So now I quickly want to mention some points that I've made, which is like, if you have this position, you know, wherever we have the North Node, we can be quite good with something, like in a very eccentric, genius type of way. And for you, those fields could be, you know, in the realms of intuition, like I was saying. Scorpio and the 8th house is the is all of the hidden aspects of life, you know, the energetic realms, the realms that are not seen. So psychology, intuition, you can be very gifted with this when you actually delve in it and actually become grounded, and especially, you know, with actual self-reflection and actual intimacy with self, like I explained before. Then research as well, you know, not just psychology, but researchers of different kind, like scientists and anything that involves digging deep, because that's what this sign is all about. So spirituality is also related to that, the occult, you know, tantra, just digging deep, working with energy. Then different kinds of the sexual arts as well, and you know, like tantra. And then other fields also, like coal and, you know, iron ore, gemstones, again, things that are hidden beneath the surface. Finances as well are related to this. You know, somehow this house is also related to finance and joint resources. So all of these fields you can be good at, and perhaps, you know, sometimes, not in all cases, but sometimes you can find yourself devoted to these careers, like you'll find yourself working in these careers related to such things. So people who are very emotionally stable, they can handle this, you know, they know that it's that even if I lose everything I have, I'm, you know, I have myself to rely on, like that these emotions are a part of life, you know, that they have this higher trust, you can say, that, you know, even if I lose everything, it will kind of show up, you know, through the help of others, and through because and I can take it emotionally, because I'm not scared of my negative emotions, you know, my fears, my paranoias and everything are all okay. So they accept it, which is why they are emotionally empowered. So wherever we have the North Node, we need to remember that it's not about, you know, the quantity, but the quality. So we, like I keep saying, we can have this obsession, and for you that would be the 8th house, you know, Scorpio things, the hidden side of life, and about intimacy as well. But it's about, you know, staying with it until you go deep. So it's not just about devouring, because whatever the North Node is, it's called the dragon's head, and we want to devour everything, you know, related to that. It's like we have this insatiable appetite, but at the same time we don't digest anything. So it's kind of like we're just eating, and then the food just falls out, you know, because it's only a dragon's head without the body. That's what the North Node is represented as. But how we can you know, work with that is that we, whatever we take in, you know, we relish it. And you know how to do this, you know, as somebody who has the South Node in Taurus, you know how to do this with your physical life, you know, just like with material things. And just like, you know, if you think of food, for example, you are someone probably who knows how to relish it. Like when you're taking food in, you know, the fact that what it tastes like and everything, and you appreciate the value of maybe even that one thing that you're eating, rather than needing to devour like many different things. So it's the same, you know, with the hidden side of life, with your emotions as well. That, so for example, you know, instead of going for because the 8th house is sexual intimacy, so this can lead to somebody who is, you know, obsessed with sexuality. So one way that it can play out in a lower way is that they, you know, want to experiment with many different people or whatever, and so there's a lot of sexual energy in that sense that they want to devour, but they don't ever go fully as deep as they can, because you know, and even if you take just one person and you fully go deep within them, that requires like fully opening up everything that you are, you know, emotionally, all of your vulnerabilities. And even when it comes to intimacy with another person, even joint finances, which is so much a part of this position, you know, that you have, even that requires a lot of vulnerability, you know, and also receiving from another. So even if you do that, you know, like even if you just do it with one person, but you penetrate fully, deeply, fully opening up, you know, fully becoming vulnerable, that's what is needed. That's how you actually digest the energy of sexuality. And I'll give you another example. It's like, you know, also the North Node in the 8th house, like I keep saying, relates to the occult or psychology, because again, that's the hidden side of life. So a lower manifestation of this can be just someone who has, let's say they become a healer because, you know, they want to work with this energy, or a a psychologist of some kind, a counselor or whatever, and they will have like many clients, and they'll work with many clients because on different issues, or soak up, different disciplines related to this area, related to the occult or to psychology. And so they're working with many different issues, but again, it's kind of outside of themselves. They might be helping other people because they're learned in it as a concept. And they might have done inner work themselves too, to a large degree, but it's not fully complete. Like if you're feeling not balanced with this energy, it's because you still need to penetrate deeply within yourself. So that means that the only time that this will become fully grounded is when you allow that same process to happen within yourself, to become vulnerable with yourself. Like instead of going out there and trying to heal many people and trying to become the best healer and this most empowered healer, and you don't yet feel that way somehow within yourself, that means because you haven't penetrated deeply within yourself. You're not fully comfortable with vulnerability with yourself yet. There's something you're still judging about, having negative emotions or not seeing something, and all of that has to do with judgment. So allowing intimacy with another person first means allowing it with yourself, and that again has to do with just no judgment for it, being comfortable with change, being comfortable with the fact that we have these things, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just fear that's there, and the moment that we look at it without judgment, it actually just dissolves into within us and becomes like a gift, like a gem, almost like when you dive deep under the earth, you might be scared to do it, like you're mining or something. It's all dark and unexplored, but then when you go deep enough, you find that gem. So that is what your life is about, to go deep within, and there will be the real gems for you there. This axis also, I forgot to say, because the side of Taurus or the second house is very sensual. So that means you are already a very sensual person, and you know how to relish like your senses and all of the material things that life has to offer. And then when the other side is developed, which is the North Node in the 8th house or in Scorpio, this becomes somebody who's very empowered. And what that means is that they also become sexually empowered, because it's about intimacy with self. When we have emotional intimacy with ourselves, other people feel it, and that's actually what real sexuality is. Real sexuality is being fully vulnerable, naked and open with the other person emotionally too, in a way that you bond. So when you have that relationship with yourself, you become this sexually magnetic person as well. So this axis is really good for that. When we become mature with both sides equally, we are someone who has this energy of being sensual as well as sexual, and very magnetic with that as well to other people.